Yo, what's up, everybody? Professor V here, and this is the lecture for Abnormal Psychology, Chapter 6 Dissociative Disorders, Somatic Symptom, and Related Disorders. Let's go. Dissociative disorders involve changes or disturbances in identity, memory, or consciousness that affect the ability to maintain an integrated sense of self. Major dissociative disorders include dissociative identity disorder, dissociative amnesia, and depersonalization disorder.
Writing under a pseudonym, Quiet Storm, a woman posts a message on an online bulletin board to share her experience of what it is like to have multiple personalities residing within herself. She describes a personality that was so fractured because of severe childhood abuse that it had splintered into many pieces. Some of the pieces bear memories of the abuse, whereas others go about their business unaware of the pain and trauma. Now imagine that these separate parts develop their own unique characteristics. Imagine, too, that these alter personalities become so compartmentalized that they don't know of each other's existence. One personality, Sally, is a nurse. Another, Diana, is a therapist, while Patty is a playful little girl who collects insects, which she keeps in a mayonnaise jar. There is also Claire, the shy one, and Kathy, an adolescent working hard to grow up. She refers to herself as we, a collection of many different people who share the same body. These alter personalities have their own individual goals, fears, and memories. Some of them are still mired in the past. A dark past filled with shrouded memories of traumatic abuse and incest. These alters were born of abuse they suffered at the hands of their own father. There would be one alter, Nancy, who would go to father when he beckoned her to lay with him, shielding the others from having to do the things he demanded. Nancy protected the others, but at the cost of fracturing the sense of self that makes each of us a whole person.
This is a description of dissociative identity disorder, known popularly as multiple personality, perhaps the most perplexing and intriguing of all psychological disorders. Dissociative identity disorder is classified as a type of dissociative disorder, a grouping of psychological disorders characterized by changes or disturbances in the functions of self, like identity, memory, and consciousness. Things that make the personality whole.
In dissociative identity disorder, two or more distinct personalities, each possessing well-defined traits and memories, exist within the person and repeatedly try to take control of the person's behavior. The personalities may or may not be aware of each other. The clusters of alter personalities serve as a microscope of conflicting urges and cultural themes. So back to Rico. If Rico were to say he is suffering from having 4 different personalities that each have their own unique traits and memories living inside of him, he could be diagnosed as having DID. Diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder is rare and remains very controversial. Many believe that DID is not a distinct disorder but a form of role playing in which individuals first come to construe with their conception of the disorder. Eventually, their role playing becomes so ingrained that it becomes a reality to them. It appears to be cultural bound, largely restricted to North America, while some countries, such as in Switzerland, 90% of their psychiatrists have never seen a case of the disorder, or in Japan, where not a single case was found. Dissociative amnesia is considered to be the most common form of a dissociative disorder. Persons with the disorder are unable to recall important personal information, usually involving traumatic or stressful experiences, in a way that cannot be accounted for by simple forgetfulness. Memory loss cannot be attributed to particular medical conditions either, such as head trauma or drug use or alcohol use. Dissociative amnesias include localized amnesia, selective amnesia, generalized amnesia, continuous amnesia, and systematized amnesia. Localized amnesia is the most common form of dissociative amnesia, which involves the inability to remember events that took place in a specific time period, such as being unable to recall events for a number of hours or days after a stressful or traumatic event, perhaps a car accident or a physical altercation. Selective amnesia is when a person forgets only disturbing particulars that take place during a certain time period. An example could be a soldier who was deployed overseas and involved in the war and can remember a particular battle but not the death of his buddy. Generalized amnesia is when a person forgets their entire life history, who they are, what they do, whom they live with. This is actually quite rare and the rarest form of dissociative amnesia, but wouldn't seem so if you watch too much television. Those who suffer from generalized amnesia cannot recall personal information, but they tend to retain their habits, tastes, and skills, such as the language that they spoke before the onset of amnesia. Continuous amnesia is a form of amnesia that a person forgets everything that has occurred from a particular point in time and including the present. And systemized amnesia is memory loss to a particular category of information, such as memories about one's family or particular people in their life. People with dissociative amnesia typically forget events or periods of life that were traumatic to them, which generated strong negative emotions such as horror or guilt. A rare subtype of dissociative amnesia is characterized by fugue or amnesia on the run. In dissociative fugue, the person may travel suddenly and unexpectedly from his or her home or place of work. The travels may be purposeful, leading to a particular place, or involve just bewildered wandering. During a fugue state, a person may be unable to recall past memories, personal information, and become confused about his or her identity, or even assumes a new one altogether. Despite these odd behaviors, the person may appear to be normal or show no other signs of mental disturbance. This state can last for hours, days, months, or even years. Dissociative amnesia can also be difficult to distinguish from malingering. This is a person who is dissatisfied with their former life and can claim to have amnesia when they are discovered in new locations and new identities. Clinicians may find it hard to distinguish true amnesia from amnesia that is faked to allow a person to start a new life. Depersonalization is a temporary loss or change in the usual sense of our own reality. Derealization is a sense of unreality about the external world involving odd changes in the perception of one's surroundings and may also be present. The state of depersonalization is often described as feeling detached from oneself and surroundings, as if a person is in a dream or acting like a robot. In derealization, people and objects may seem to change in size or shape, and sounds may seem different. Derealization has been shown to be associated with features of anxiety, such as dizziness, and fears of going insane, or with depression. In order to be diagnosed with depersonalization disorder, these experiences must become persistent or recurrent and cause significant distress or impairment in daily functioning. Although these sensations are strange, people with depersonalization disorder maintain contact with reality and are able to distinguish reality from fantasy or unreality. Psychodynamic theorists view dissociative experiences as a form of psychological defense by which the ego defends itself against troubling memories and unacceptable impulses by blotting them out of consciousness. There is increasing documentation of a link between dissociative disorders and early childhood trauma, which lends support to the view that dissociation may serve to protect the self from troubling memories. In social cognitive theory, the habit of psychologically distancing oneself by splitting off from consciousness is negatively reinforced by relief from anxiety or removal of feelings of guilt or shame. However, as mentioned before, DID and other dissociative disorders are believed to be a form of role playing through observational learning and reinforcement by many theorists. Research demonstrates structural brain differences between patients with dissociative identity disorder and healthy controls. And there may be differences in brain metabolic activity between people with depersonalization disorder and healthy subjects. Within the diathesis stress model, dissociative identity disorder may be explained in terms of diatheses consisting of psychological traits such as a rich inner fantasy life and high levels of hypnotizability, interacting with traumatic stress in the form of severe childhood abuse. Personality traits such as proneness to fantasize, ability to be hypnotized, or openness to altered states of consciousness may be contributing factors to depersonalization experiences. They do not lead to dissociative disorders, just those that have these traits are more prone to dissociative disorders. In the end, depersonalization doesn't happen at random, but can occur with mild depression or mild anxiety. Treatment of dissociative disorders from the biological approach focuses on the use of drugs to treat the anxiety and depression often associated with the disorder. But drugs have not been able to bring about reintegration of the personality. Therapists may seek to help patients uncover and work through memories of early childhood trauma. Learning Perspectives focuses on the use of behavioral methods of reinforcement of the well-adjusted personality. An individual with a somatic symptom disorder, or SSD, presents with physical complaints that cannot be accounted for by organic causes. Thus, the symptoms are theorized to reflect psychological rather than organic factors. The major categories of somatic symptom disorders identified in the DSM-5 include somatic symptom disorder, illness anxiety disorder, conversion disorder, and factitious disorder. People with SSD may have excessive concerns about the seriousness of their symptoms and are bothered by nagging anxiety about what their symptoms might mean, and spend a great deal of time running to doctor seeking a cure or confirmation that their worries are valid. This may sound like hypochondriasis, in which people with physical complaints who believe their symptoms were due to a serious, undetected illness such as cancer or heart disease, despite medical reassurance to the contrary. Hypochondriasis affect about 5% of the general population. People with hypochondriasis feel real physical discomfort or even pain and may be overly sensitive to bodily changes such as changes in heartbeat or just minor aches and pains. Hypochondriasis is no longer in use by the DSM as they are now diagnosed with somatic symptom disorder. So, if Shelley complains of physical problems which date back to her adolescence, she has suffered from muscle weakness, abdominal pain, chest pains, and even urinary problems. She actually really suffers from these symptoms, but her doctors have not been able to find a physical cause. She is most likely suffering from somatic symptom disorder. The DSM has introduced a new diagnostic category of illness anxiety disorder, or IAD, in order to identify a subgroup of people with hypochondriasis who complain of relatively minor or mild symptoms they take to be signs of a serious undiagnosed illness. The emphasis with the individuals with this disorder is on the anxiety associated with illness rather than the distress the symptoms cause. For those that suffer from illness anxiety disorder, it is not the actual symptoms that they find troubling. It is the thought of what these symptoms may actually mean. In some cases, there are no reported symptoms, but the person still expresses serious concerns about having a serious undiagnosed illness. There are two subtypes. Care avoidant type applies to people who postpone or avoid medical visits or lab tests because of high levels of anxiety about what may be discovered if they were to see the results. And care seeking type describes those that doctor shop, basically jumping from doctor to doctor trying to find a doctor to confirm their fears.
How much time do you spend worrying about your health?
I think I don't know if it's average or whatever, but The first thing I think of when I get up in the morning, I have my vitamins and everything. It's on my mind all the time.
How many doctors do you think you've seen since, your early 20s or so, if you had to guess at a number?
Gosh, specialist, I guess probably 60, 70.
Wow. That's a lot
Maybe
of doctors.
more. But
Okay. Yeah.
I burn them out.
You do?
Well, I don't know if say I burn them out. I feel that sometimes I'm getting an answer that I'm being dealt with, that I'm getting a sort of I'm not really, like I had a growth that I was worried about on my face that I went to a dermatologist, and she totally was like dismissed me. And I finally found someone else who said, yes, we can remove it. These are the consequences. This is fine, But it's not like I'm always looking for an answer.
Right. Why do you think she dismissed you?
She just decided that, you don't have anything yet. Maybe it could happen in the future. And I don't know whether it was something to do with her personal practice or whether she was not able to, whether it was money related, whether it was my insurance, whatever.
Okay. Have you gone from doctor to doctor looking for someone to confirm what you think might be wrong
I've
with
had, I've just been chatting about health insurance, so I've been definitely trying to, I feel, at least lately, that doctors are less, in general, they don't have the luxury of being as thorough as we would think that they should be.
So does that then lead you from specialist to specialist?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
I have had that.
Okay. What happens when you call the doctor's office?
Well, I hear snickering in the background. They go, "It's him again." I know. I mean, the nurses and all that. And I'm thicker skinned than that. I can handle all that. I don't mind. I do what I need to do to feel better, to get over the anxiety. The whole thing is getting over the anxiety. Yep. I've had bad news. I've heard about various things. Most of it is fear of losing, not as much death per se, as losing, as most people would, functionality or whatever, or
so you're really afraid of being sick.
right.
In conversion disorder, symptoms or deficits in voluntary motor or sensory functions occur which suggest an underlying physical disorder, such as the inability to walk or inability to hear, but no apparent medical basis for the condition can be found. Again, hypochondriasis is a preoccupation with the fear of having or the belief that one has serious medical illness, but no medical basis for the complaint can be found, and fears of illness persist despite medical reassurances. This is a psychological disorder because the loss or impairment of physical functions is inconsistent or incompatible with known medical conditions or diseases. Unfortunately, just as all the somatic symptom disorders, there's a controversy behind it, as sometimes a person may appear to have conversion disorder, but turns out to be an intentional fabrication of faking symptoms for some external gain, and clinicians lack the ability to determine if someone is faking. It has been seen that the physical symptoms of conversion disorder usually come on during stressful situations. So if Rico has been under a lot of stress at work lately, and one morning he awakens to find he is totally blind, He goes to see a doctor, and his doctor cannot find anything physically wrong with his eyes, and Rico appears to have no troubling maneuvering around the furniture in his home or in the physician's office. Rico is not consciously faking and swears he cannot see. Rico is suffering from conversion disorder. What is strange in this example is that even if Rico cannot supposedly see, he is still able to maneuver around his furniture. This is not because he knows where the items are at, but because he can still see. His brain can still process the images that are coming in through his eyes. He may not be conscious of what he is seeing if conversion disorder is real within Rico. People with factitious disorder fake or manufacture physical or psychological symptoms but without any apparent motive. Munchausen syndrome is the more properly known form of this disorder. Sometimes they may injure themselves or take medication that causes life-threatening problems. The major difference between factitious disorder and other somatic symptom disorders is that there is no reason or motive to do this to oneself. Many people may fake illness to avoid work or receive disability benefits, but this is not the cause in those that suffer from factitious disorder. They just assume a sick role. There are two types: factitious disorder imposed on oneself, in which we have mainly been discussing, in which a person takes on an illness themselves, and factitious disorder imposed on another, in which people intentionally falsify or induce physical or emotional illness or injury on another. Sadly, it is usually a child or other dependent. They may be unconsciously trying to gain sympathy for having to care to attend to a sick child. There is a clear link to heinous crimes on children. The psychodynamic view holds that conversion disorders represent the conversion into physical symptoms of the leftover emotion or energy that is cut off from unacceptable or threatening impulses that the ego has prevented from reaching awareness. The symptom is functional, allowing the person to achieve both primary and secondary gains. Primary gains allows for an individual to keep internal conflicts repressed. For example, the hysterical paralysis for an arm might symbolize and also prevent an individual from acting on repressed, unacceptable sexual or aggressive impulses. Secondary gain allows individuals to avoid burdensome responsibilities and to gain the support of those around them. For example, soldiers sometimes experience sudden paralysis of their hands, which prevents them from firing their weapons in battle. They may then be sent to a hospital to recuperate rather than face enemy fire. Learning theorists focus on the reinforcements that are associated with conversion disorders, such as the reinforcing effects of adopting a sick role. A learning theory view likens hypochondriasis to obsessive compulsive behavior. Cognitive factors in hypochondriasis include self-handicapping strategies and cognitive distortions. It may lead to a person to misinterpret minor changes in bodily changes as signs of pending catastrophe. Researchers have recently investigated the possibility of impairment of neural connections in cases of conversion disorder. Research on the biological underpinnings of somatic symptoms and related disorders is in its infancy, but it promises to help elucidate connections between anxiety and brain function. Psychoanalysis seeks to uncover and bring to the level of awareness the unconscious conflicts originating in childhood that are believed to be at the root of the problem. Once the conflict is uncovered and worked through, the hysterical symptom should disappear because it is no longer needed as a partial solution to the underlying conflict. Behavioral approaches focuses on removing sources of reinforcement that may be maintaining the abnormal behavior pattern. Behavior therapists may also work more directly to help people with somatoform disorders learn to handle stressful or anxiety arousing situations more effectively. Cognitive techniques such as cognitive restructuring have been very helpful in treating hypochondriasis. And this wraps up the lecture for chapter 6. Hope you enjoyed it, learned something new, did not make up any personalities along the way, and I will see you in the next lecture. Ciao. Now, don't get used to these short lectures now, okay? Because they're not always going to be this short. Arizona, watermelon drink. This may sound like hypochondriac. Stuff is so good.